All right. Welcome to another deep dive with us. Today, we've got two pretty interesting sources you sent our way.
Oh, yeah.
First up, we have an excerpt from the website of, well, this guy, Andrew Spira. He's like a motivational speaker, an entrepreneur, all that.
Okay, interesting. What's the second one?
The second one, it's an Investopedia article all about strategic financial management.
At first glance, I wouldn't think those two have a ton in common. But I bet we can find some connections.
Exactly. That's what we're here for. So let's start with Andrew Spira. His background is, well, pretty impressive.
Yeah.
In what way?
He's had, some rough patches, but he turned things around, became successful in real estate, and then fintech. And get this, he's also a philanthropist.
Wow, that's quite a range. And what's really striking to me is, well, how his personal journey, it kind of reflects a lot of the principles of strategic financial management.
You think so? Even though he doesn't, explicitly say that.
I do. It's like his story is a real-life example of how powerful long-term vision and resilience can be. There's this one quote on his website that really stood out to me. He's giving advice to this young guy, like 26 years old. He says, "You're in such a great place and don't even realize it." He has absolutely nothing to lose and no expectations.
Wow.
And then he goes on, he's starting from zero, so anything he does is going to be a win.
That's a really interesting perspective, especially for someone just starting out.
It is.
And it actually touches on something that's super important in strategic financial management.
What's that?
Sometimes the best position to be in is the one where you're free to take risks, even if it means you might lose a bit in the short term.
So it's like that saying, you got to lose some battles to win the war, but instead of battles, we're talking about money decisions.
Exactly. Now, the Investopedia article, it defines strategic financial management as basically managing your money to reach long-term success, maximizing what they call shareholder value.
So making choices today that'll set you up for success way down the line.
5, 10, even 20 years down the line. And looking at Spira's life, it seems like that's what he's done.
Makes you wonder how he dealt with those setbacks he mentions. Like there's this whole thing about an online smear campaign against him.
Oh, right.
That couldn't have been easy. To come back from that and still achieve this level of success, that's resilience in action, right?
Absolutely. He's not just talking the talk, he's walking the walk. See, the article makes a distinction between strategic and tactical financial management.
What's the difference?
Tactical management. It's all about grabbing those short-term opportunities, which can be important, don't get me wrong. But if you're not guided by a larger strategic vision, you can end up going in the wrong direction.
Oh, I see. So it's like focusing on picking up pennies when someone's handing out $100 bills right next to you.
Perfect analogy. The article breaks down strategic financial management into a few key parts. You've got planning, budgeting, managing risk, and establishing ongoing procedures.
Okay, that makes sense. Actually, when you think about it, Spira's advice to that young guy, it totally lines up with that whole planning thing. He says, figure out what you want to do with your life, figure out how you will make money doing it, and then educate yourself until you're a master at it.
It's like he's giving him a step-by-step guide to, long-term success.
Exactly. And that focus on education, it's huge, right?
It is. It connects with what the article says about managing risk. The more you know, the better you are at spotting potential problems and making smart choices.
Right. So it's not just about gathering random information. You got to become an expert in whatever you choose to do. That's what lets you not just survive, but thrive.
Exactly.
Even when something unexpected pops up. Kind of like how Spira mastered real estate, fintech, even philanthropy, different fields, but he succeeded in all of them.
Exactly. And, this is where things get really interesting. The article talks about tailoring your strategy to the specific industry you're in.
Wait, so does that mean someone running a tech company needs a totally different approach than someone who, say, runs a farm?
Not necessarily completely different, but the focus shifts, depending on how that industry works.
Gotcha.
The article gives examples like using growth-focused strategies for industries that are booming and asset protection for those that are more slow and steady.
So a tech startup might be all about expanding quickly and grabbing market share, while a farm might focus on protecting and making the most of what they already have.
You got it. And this brings us back to Spira. He didn't just succeed in one field. He found success in several, each needing its own unique strategic approach.
That's true. Hey, before we move on, I wanted to touch on those testimonials on Spira's website.
Oh, yeah, the ones from people he's helped.
Yeah, there are a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And they all talk about how his coaching and motivational talks really changed their lives.
It seems like his approach really connects with people.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating to see how these stories, personal stories of change, link back to those bigger ideas of strategic thinking and how you manage your finances.
It's almost like those testimonials are like case studies and putting these principles into practice in your own life.
You could say that, definitely.
Wow, this has been a really eye-opening look into Spira's approach and all these big concepts of strategic financial management. It's amazing how his story and that Investopedia article kind of work together,
It is. And honestly, I think we're just scratching the surface here.
Really?
In the next part, we'll dig deeper into the specific strategies and tactics from the article. And we'll explore how you can actually apply these ideas to your own life or career.
Because, like we're seeing, it's not just about managing money for a company, it's about managing your whole life strategically.
Yep.
So stick around. All right, welcome back to our deep dive into strategic financial management. It's really starting to click for me how this stuff can apply to way more than just business,
Oh, absolutely. It's a really adaptable framework.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, we've seen how Andrew Spira's own journey, it kind of embodies a lot of these principles.
Yeah, definitely. So now, where do we go from here? How do we actually put these ideas into action?
Good question. Well, the Investopedia article, it breaks down strategic financial management into a few key elements. I think if we unpack those, it'll be super helpful.
All right, let's unpack. The first one they mention is planning, right? And I feel like we already touched on this a bit with Spira's advice about figuring out what you want to do and, how to make money doing it.
We did. And that's really the foundation, isn't it? Like, if you want to build a solid financial strategy, you got to start with a clear vision of where you're headed.
Yeah, makes sense. But how specific do you have to be with your goals? Is it enough to say, I want to be financially successful, or does it need to be more concrete than that?
That's a great question. And the article really emphasizes the importance of being specific. Financially successful, that can mean a million different things to different people. So you need to define what it means for you. Are you aiming for a certain income? Building a nest egg for retirement? Maybe creating a legacy for your family?
So it's like setting a destination on a map. You got to know where you're going if you want to figure out the best way to get there.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And once you've got those objectives, the next step is, well, budgeting.
Budgeting. Okay, gotta be honest, that word always makes me want to zone out a little. It feels so restrictive, like putting yourself on a diet, but for your money.
I get that.
Yeah.
But budgeting doesn't have to be about, depriving yourself. It's more about making sure your spending aligns with what you value and your long-term goals.
So it's not about saying no to everything. It's more about making conscious choices about where your money goes, right? Instead of just letting it slip away on things that don't really matter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the article, it mentions how important it is to use your budget to make sure you have enough liquidity to cover your operating expenses.
Liquidity. Okay, that sounds a bit technical. What does that even mean?
It sounds fancy, but it really just means having enough cash on hand to pay your bills. It applies to your personal finances just as much as it does to running a business.
Oh, that makes sense. I guess if you're always struggling to make ends meet, it's going to be hard to focus on the bigger picture.
Exactly. Okay, so we've covered planning, budgeting. Now let's move on to managing and assessing risk. This is where things get really interesting, I think.
Oh, yeah, risk. Everyone's always talking about taking risks. But I've always wondered, how do you actually do that intelligently? How do you assess risk without getting totally overwhelmed?
The million-dollar question. Well, the article talks about identifying, analyzing, and then mitigating uncertainty, when you're making investment decisions.
Okay, but that sounds like it mostly applies to, financial investments, right? Like stocks and bonds and stuff.
It does. But think about it. Risk is everywhere. It's on our career choices, relationships, even hobbies.
So before you jump into anything new, whether it's a new job or even a new relationship, you should think about what could go wrong and how can I minimize those risks?
Exactly. Now, the article dives into some pretty complex stuff like risk metrics, standard deviation, value at risk calculations.
Yeah, I'm not sure I follow all that.
Yeah, it gets technical. But the basic idea is to understand the range of possible outcomes.
So instead of just focusing on the best case scenario, which, let's be honest, we all do, you're also thinking about the worst case scenario and everything in between.
Right. It's about having a realistic view.
Yeah.
Acknowledging the potential ups and downs. And that helps you make smarter decisions about how much risk you're actually comfortable taking.
Makes sense. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got planning, budgeting, managing risk. What's the last element?
Let's see. The article calls it establishing ongoing procedures. What's that all about?
Well, it's all about creating systems to help you stay on track. Keep yourself accountable.
Systems. So it's not enough to just have a plan. You need a way to actually put it into practice and see if it's working.
Exactly. The article talks about things like collecting data and analyzing it, consistently making sound financial choices, and really tracking what's actually happening versus what you planned.
So it's like having a financial dashboard, right? One that gives you real-time feedback on how you're doing.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And it allows you to make adjustments along the way, to course correct if you start veering off track. It's like having a GPS for your financial journey.
This is starting to make a lot more sense. It feels a lot less overwhelming when you break it down like this.
It is a lot to digest, for sure. But remember, we're exploring these concepts in depth.
Right.
And in the next part, we'll get even more practical. We'll look at some specific strategies to apply these principles to your own life.
Okay, sounds good. I'm ready for part 3.
All right, welcome back. We've covered so much in this deep dive.
We have.
From Andrew Spira's story to all those principles of strategic financial management.
I'm starting to really get how it all connects,
It is a lot to process, for sure. But hopefully you're seeing how these concepts can be used for way more than just business.
Yeah, exactly. It's about making smart choices in all parts of your life.
That's it.
It's like we've been talking about this financial roadmap, but it can lead you to any goal, really, not just financial ones.
Exactly. Whether it's your career, relationships, personal growth, these principles, they really apply.
So how do we take these big ideas and actually put them into action?
Good question.
The article mentioned industry-specific strategies.
Right.
But for us, personally, how do we figure out what our own industry is?
I like that way of putting it. Because we all have different circumstances, different goals, different resources.
Right.
And those should be our guide when making strategic decisions.
So like someone just starting their career, they might have a different strategy than someone who's about to retire.
Exactly. Someone early on might be all about taking risks, investing in their skills, even taking on some debt to move things along faster.
While someone closer to retirement might be more focused on protecting what they've earned, minimizing risk, maybe building some passive income.
Precisely. And what's great about this framework is that it adapts. It works for any stage of life, any career, any goal you can think of.
So it's like a toolbox, right? You pick the right tool for the job.
Perfect analogy.
Another thing that really stood out in the article was the importance of thinking long-term. And honestly, I think that's where a lot of us struggle.
Oh, I agree.
It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and lose sight of the bigger picture. It takes a lot of discipline to keep that long-term vision in mind.
It does. And it also takes, well, vision. You have to be able to imagine a future that's different from your present and then take those steps to make it happen.
It's like Andrew Spira and that smear campaign.
Right.
He didn't let that stop him.
Yeah.
He kept his eye on his goals.
Exactly. He kept going. Took those challenges and turned them into opportunities to grow. That's something we can all learn from. I mean, we all face setbacks. It's how we react to them that determines our success.
That's a great point. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this. Strategic thinking, it's not just for CEOs or, big shot entrepreneurs at all. It can benefit everyone.
Well, absolutely.
No matter what your background is or what you want to achieve.
It's a skill that gives you the power to shape your future.
So take some time to think about your own life. Think about your long-term goals. What are the things you can do today to move closer to those goals? What risks might you face and how can you prepare for them?
And remember, you don't need all the answers right now. It's a journey. You learn as you go, you adapt.
Exactly. Because ultimately it's about creating the life you want.
One strategic decision at a time.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.
Until next time.